Coming up on the live and interactive ACSA legislative lunch break, Edgar and I will get you all of your latest news and information from the state capitol and CDE with an in-depth analysis on how it impacts you. Plus, we are coming down to the end of the legislative session. We've got two of our legislative advocates on the show today to talk about what's happening right now and what you need to know.
The ACSA legislative lunch break starts now.
And it's a couple of minutes after 1 o'clock. We welcome you on a Wednesday to the live and interactive ACSA legislative lunch break, along with Dr. Edgar Zazwata, ACSA's executive director. I'm Naj Ali Khan, ACSA's senior director of marketing and communications. Welcome. We are honored to have you here on a Wednesday. Go ahead and jump into the chat and say hello and let us know where you're watching from today. I know for many of you, this is a very unique site, especially since this is his show. But Edgar, welcome back to the legislative lunch break.
It's been a while, Naj. It's good to be back. I had to be honest. I actually even forgot today that we were doing it. As you folks realize, take you behind the scenes here a couple minutes ago. I so happy. Unlike Naj, who sleeps, I think, in his shirt and tie and coat and is dressed up at all times. I left today. I had a bunch of internal meetings, walk around. It's still hot here in Sacramento. So I was going without a coat. And then I realized I had a lunch break. So thanks to Michael Kelly for outfitting me here. I feel like a real professional now where you just come in. I am wearing pants. Unlike I know Naj sometimes likes to rock the shorts look in our early legislative lunch break days, but it's gonna be back. This is always fun to do lunch break. I know the team has been doing a great job without me, frankly, probably better. But thank you for letting me do it here, at least this week.
Yeah, well, at least this week. I just want to let you know, and we'll say hello to our viewers. Neri's first up on the chat today. Philip is with us. Shell Ella, that might be a new viewer with us today. I'm not sure. Ben Churchill as well. Just folks, just so you know,
you've memorized every single person who has ever dialed into the legislative lunch break, right?
I try and do my
I'm always impressed.
Yeah, I try and do my look.
Happy first day of school to Ben Churchill there, and to all the folks who I know are here. I know where we're getting now into the part of August where most of the schools have already started. So always an exciting part of the year.
Yeah,
for our members.
I have to say, since the last time you've come on the show, we've had a couple of things happen in the world that I think I should probably update you on. First, schools, as you just mentioned with Ben, schools were not in session the last time you were co-hosting this show. The Olympics had not started since the last time. And there's a new Democratic candidate for president. That didn't happen when you were on the last time. So we've had some things going on. I know you've been on vacation and traveling. I just wanted to make sure you were updated about.
I appreciate that. I did take a finally here at the end of the summer. I was able to squeeze in some days before my own kids who started school here. Shout out to Sac City Unified as they started classes here a little bit earlier this year, which I know was I think a good change that they finally got. Now they were forced into it, and we won't get into that. There were some things that happened in Sacramento over the last couple of years that forced them to move their calendar. But yeah, so my kids started, and I got to spend a few days with my son and my brother. Where I think I've talked about this. We're on this mission. Hopefully, by the time he finishes high school, we will have visited all 30 shifts, but all the major league ballparks. So we went to St. Louis, Chicago, went to Milwaukee. So it was a great trip. It was a great trip here before school started.
Yeah, the photos are great. The photos are great from your trip. Folks, we've got a couple of our great ACSA legislative advocates coming up on the show in just a couple of minutes to talk about what's happening here at the Capitol as we wind through the end of this legislative session. So we'll have them on in a couple of minutes. And of course, we'll take your questions as well. A couple of news stories, and this first one is really interesting, Edgar, published in the Los Angeles Times, titled "Chronically Absent Students. Can Cash and Recess Get Them Back?" The Times reports that 1 in every 4 students, nearly 1.5 million students here in California, were chronically absent in 2022-23. In LA Unified, the Times reports, it was 1 in 3 students. Chronic absenteeism in Oakland rose from 29% pre-pandemic to 53% in that same time frame, 2022-23. So they're doing something about it. A grant program launched in spring 2023 paid 45 students $50 weekly for perfect attendance. Students checked in every day with an assigned adult. More than 60% improved their attendance after taking part in the program. Is expected to continue. So they're doing work over there in LA Unified and in Oakland Unified to get students back into the classroom. The other thing we want to tell you about, and Edgar, we've talked about it here on this show because we've had Jamie Green, who represents rural schools, talk a little bit about that Rural Schools Act. You can see Jamie there the last time he was on. Edweek reporting that the Secure Rural Schools Act still hasn't been extended in the federal government. And if it isn't extended before the 25-26 school year, school districts in more than 700 counties will lose a funding stream that they depend on. Now, the funding is crucial for rural districts and counties with abundant forest land that otherwise limits taxable property. You see Jamie Green there from Trinity Alps. He spoke on this on our legislative lunch break, March 23, and he still goes out to D.C. when he can lobby for this crucial funding. So, Edgar, I mean, we talked about this on this show some time ago about those counties, about those regions that don't have the taxes coming in because they do have so much forest land there. I'm surprised. I know that when I was reading the story, I was really surprised to know we still haven't gotten this passed yet. And we're talking about crucial school funding districts.
Yeah, I mean, kudos to Jamie. And I know a lot of our folks from throughout the state that live in those type of areas, in those rural areas. I just admire. I mean, you showed some of the clips there. He has been a one-man machine. I know we were getting messages from him earlier this week, really trying to keep attention on this issue. And, you know, it's a typical piece. DC works very differently. Sometimes even on an issue like this, which at face value should be bipartisan, given just the types of areas that we're representing. And this is that not just here in California, but around the country. And so I think this is one where we're just going to have to continue to beat on that drum and talk about that effect and what is it going to mean for students. But I really admire that there's no substitute, as we say, to that kind of grassroots advocacy. As great as our advocates are, as great as an organization like ACSA is, when our leaders go and take this on as a personal cause and go and talk to their policymakers directly, I think it always has a great effect.
I want to make mention. We talked about chronic absenteeism, and Kyla Griffin is on here. She talks about she's in alternative education and contemplated this seriously. We talked a little bit about the chronic absenteeism and some of the work that's being done in LA Unified and in Oakland Unified, where they're actually paying some of the students for perfect attendance. Our attendance capturing needs more flexibility, especially to students who are not chronically ill, but still need frequent appointments. So that was interesting to hear, Kyla. Thanks so much for that. Let's go ahead and bring in our two guests because we are wrapping up on this legislative session, and we want to give you the details of what is taking place right now, take you inside the state capitol. So let's bring on our two guests today, Surette Kaminsky and Dorothy Johnson, two of our great ACSA legislative advocates with us today. Surette and Dorothy, great to have you back here on the ACSA legislative lunch break. So let's just dive into this for both of you. And Dorothy, will have you start. The legislature reconvened from their summer recess August 5th. Final day of the session is August 23rd. So what's it like inside the state capitol during this crunch time period?
Well, great to be back. I can't remember the last time I was on the show, but always great to see everyone out there in audience land. So the last weeks of session are kind of crazy. Normally about 6 months to introduce a bill, have it go through policy committee, maybe fiscal committee, vote on the floor. We're going to see things pop up and land on the governor's desk in 6 days.
Mhm.
So it's kind of fire drill mode, kind of lifeguard mode, dealing with last minute challenges on top of making sure our priorities that we've been working on since December are going to make it all the way through, or potentially if they're opposed bills, get stopped on the floor or before they get to the governor's desk. Assemblymember Marisucci made a comment about some of the funny things he's seen in the last couple weeks of session. I know we've got lots of different audience members out there, so I'll keep it clean. But one of my favorite memories, I think, was one of these late night sessions, going till 11 o'clock at night, midnight, and walking across a push-up contest just on the floor outside of the Senate chambers, just to keep people's energy up and attention span going.
Soretta, I'll have you answer this as well. Dorothy, don't worry. We don't have broadcast standards here. So if you wanted to give us something that was beyond the push-up story, you certainly could have. So, Soretta.
Hey, wait, let me clarify. Was Dorothy part of the push-up contest?
I know. That's kind of what I didn't want to ask.
I used to get after it at the gym. So I want to make sure. I wasn't sure if that was the case or not.
Soretta, what's it like inside the state capitol during this crunch time period?
I just have to say that if you haven't listened to episode 3 of the ACSA Behind the Bills podcast, Dorothy and Yvonne swap some stories that are truly entertaining. So that's a must listen. On my side, it's really hard to explain or quantifying how exciting this time is. Actually, there's a lot of work behind the scenes. It's really exciting because even though the bill might not be in front of the governor yet, there's lots of conversations happening with legislative leadership, with the governor's staff to indicate preferences on similar bills or identifying potential problematic pieces. And sometimes there can be this last-ditch effort to keep flailing bills alive and moving through the process. So while there are rules and deadlines about when bills can be amended, there are certainly bills that come back unexpectedly. So for me, on my side, in the week prior to the fiscal committee deadline for bills to be heard, I encountered a scenario where an author and co-sponsors were seeking to significantly amend a bill in the fiscal committee. And it was in the educator shortage bucket. So, it's a Monday morning. I received 30 pages of significant amendments and an ask to lend support. It's always difficult to amend policy in a fiscal committee. And from our side, we always want to make sure that we're making things better and not unwittingly creating more roadblocks to the profession. So it's really important to properly vet the significant changes with our experts. And there were some other statewide associations that were in the same boat. And ultimately, that bill did remain dead. But like I said, it's a heavy lift to have significant policy amendments go through a fiscal committee. But the sponsors and the author, it sounds like they're looking forward to a continuing dialogue. So it might be back next time.
Well, I know Dorothy mentioned the talk with Assemblymember Succi, and he was telling some stories. I'm embarrassed to say I didn't hear it because that was one of the shows I wasn't on. I did catch that he announced that he was potentially running for state superintendent of public instruction. Right. So I did see that thanks to our social media, not because I actually saw the show live that day.
Right, not because you were watching the show.
I was busy. I'm sure, and I was not on vacation. I think I was speaking to some members on that day. But one of the things I think hearing both Soretta and Dorothy talk, it is reminding me of obviously my old days of working in the Capitol, of being on both sides. I was a staffer in the Capitol, and I've seen some of those weird traditions there at the end of session, and obviously us trying to advocate and push things through, or sometimes prevent things there at the last second. It does bring to mind. I mean, people are asking, well, why all this procrastination? What is it about the end that causes some of this chaos? So maybe I'll just throw this to either one of you. What is it about this time of year that maybe from a policy development process kind of expedites everything and puts everything on such more of a spotlight, if you will?
Sure, I'll start with that. I mean, nothing motivates you like a deadline, right? Whether you're studying for a test or getting errands done, they are really down to the final wire. This is the last year, 2-year session. Literally, midnight, August 31st, they will stop session. Well, they'll stop the clock sometimes. They'll stop the clock from moving forward. They may keep going, but technically, they're up a hard, fast deadline. So like I said, if they don't get it done now, and for many members who might be trimming out, this is their last bite at the apple. So again, if it's not done in the next 10 days or so, it's not going to get done potentially by that member at all, or have to wait and go through all the Master Nation's next session. And again, depending on the fiscal outlook, depending on all the other factors, we also have the budget now in play. So members that have expensive bills are going to cost the general fund a lot of money. They might be moving away from that effort and focusing on other policy ideas that have a slightly smaller fiscal impact. So yeah, Saret, what are you thinking?
I would say ditto to everything you said, and just add that sometimes it's like a state agency will identify like, oh, something needs to be changed. And hey, we have an avenue, and let's try to work on this bill and do a gut and amend or whatever it may be to just like handle the situation. And while it's great to quickly pivot, sometimes you really do need to have that sunshine and the transparency and the policy discussion with all the education partners, so everyone's on the same page. And I guess I'm just likening it to the last scenario that I outlined. It just, not everyone was on board, not everyone understood. It was a super wonky bill, and so I think it didn't go through just on that regard. But it's not to say that the policy wasn't sound. It just, not enough people understood the issue enough, and so it's just a little too late in the game.
And folks, if you have questions for Dorothy and Saret, go ahead and put those into our chat, and we'll tackle some of those at the end. For both of you, and Saret, I'll have you start. What big issues will ACSA be really focusing on as we move towards the end of this session?
Well, I have a handful of bills with support positions that fall into the educator workforce bucket. So one that comes to mind would integrate better data on recruitment and retention efforts. Another one would provide a pathway to the administrator credential for occupational therapists and physical therapists that have been in the school setting. Some also hit other types of policies, such as a bill that would provide more credit opportunities and continued education options to juvenile court school students. But I'd say the policy piece that I'm laser focused on right now is the issue of permitting youth age 12 and older to possess and administer over-the-counter opioid overdose reversal medications such as Narcan on school premises without bearing any liability. So some of you folks have heard me talk about this before, but expanding access to naloxone hydrochloride, and I'll just say Narcan to keep it short, that really is among the most impactful interventions in decreasing opioid deaths and saving lives. And although professional first responders may carry it, they might not arrive in time to reverse an overdose. And unfortunately, the same is true for school personnel. And a student might be uniquely primed to respond immediately to an overdose when one of their peers might be in danger. Many of our viewers already know about California's naloxone distribution project. That has made Narcan available at the school level, and this would be a complementary effort to that existing NDP initiative. So ACSA is in support of a bill, AB 2998 by Assemblymember McKinner, that would expand access by making over-the-counter naloxone available at the school level so that the student can choose to carry it as a preventative measure. That one is currently on the governor's desk. So there's also another bill passing through in the mix. It's on the floor right now. It's Senate Bill 997 by Senator Portantino. It's got a couple of policy inconsistencies between the two bills. So I'm working really closely with the senator's office on a possible path forward to make sure that these bills can both coexist. And, super pleased to share that, we share the same North Star as the senator, and that's increasing the potential to save a student's life. So, continuing those discussions right now this week.
And Dorothy, any big issues you're focusing on?
Well, I'm going to sound like a broken record, but it's a bill that was in print last year. We got it vetoed. Very pleased to report. Last year it was AB 1699. This year it's AB 2088. Big oppose. I didn't realize I was still on camera. I'm still a little fresh to this legislative lunch break, but I was grabbing our incredible floor alert that ACSA and our partners have been walking around the Capitol on this week, asking again for an opposition. This is the bill that requires you to hire the most senior person that meets the minimum qualifications. But that doesn't mean they've got the right experience or the right suitability. These are all of our classified positions, everyone from the critical school transportation providers to our TK paraeducators, even IT and finance positions, those classified spots would qualify here. So that is our number one opposed effort, AB 2088. And then we're also working to make sure that our two sponsored bills get through. One relates to preventing social media harms that target students and youth with those addictive media feeds that I know I would even want some protections from. And then our other effort in the Assembly to update the mandated reporter training to include prevention elements. So those two other efforts are going very well, and really digging in deep on AB 2088 to stop that bill and ensure we get another veto, if not a kill on the Senate floor.
Good work on that, Dorothy. I know this is a couple of years, second year on trying to focus on this. So I appreciate your leadership on not just with ACSA, but the whole community and the whole coalition working on this. Dorothy, I'll direct this question next to you because I know you're keeping track of this a little bit amongst others on our team. Probably on the road, it goes without saying that the thing I get asked the most, and we had an episode last week that focused on this issue, and this is also part of our Behind the Bills episode here is the whole issue of cell phones in schools. A lot of talk nationwide in California. For those that may have missed what we had to say before, what's the latest on is the state gonna ban cell phones in schools? I know the governor also had some correspondence here over the last week trying to make this an issue as the beginning of the year started for so many schools.
Yeah, definitely a very popular topic. We've been getting direct questions here at the GR team about what districts should or shouldn't do. What does the governor's letter mean? So the governor's letter just really restates existing policy with a strong encouragement urging LEAs to adopt policies that restrict or limit cell phone access in the classrooms, again, under current law, under the existing education code section. There are a number of bills moving through the legislature now. One would require districts to pass cell phone policies that limit access and then update that policy every couple years. And then there's another bill that would allow districts to limit social media feeds on student phones. Those local policies are great, but the problem that we're hearing and what we're our members are saying is that we need some state level guidance, some state restrictions that they can point to when it comes to the social media platforms, limiting the feed, limiting that need to always have your phone with you. That's where they're seeing it helpful so that our educators can focus on educating. This was a theme we had during the pandemic. And I think it's a theme that's reoccurring now with these cell phone restrictions. So we'll see what the governor wants to do on some of these bills. I think there's some other dynamics in play based on who the authors are, who some of the opposition parties are. But again, definitely some strong and loud conversations going on regarding cell phone use by students in the classroom and beyond.
Saret, I'll go to you next. I know this is part of the process that doesn't always get the most attention. As we like to say, a lot of policy is actually done outside of the legislature, outside of the Capitol, and that happens through various means. What can you tell us about that? I know you're following some issues that are pretty relevant to our folks that are outside the legislative realm.
Yeah, absolutely. There's always work that goes on to ensuring that the policy shifts and the changes always work for the field. So an example that comes to mind is the Children and Youth Behavioral Health Initiative. Many of our viewers know about this. This is that 5-year, over $4 billion initiative that's part of the Master Plan for Kids' Mental Health. This initiative has already come out with a whole lot of amazing resources in partnership with various state agencies. They provide free training materials for schools on a wide range of topics, helping individuals working with children and youth to recognize and respond to trauma and stress in children, or models to help schools respond to youth suicides or suicide attempts. But part of this initiative is also tasked with developing a multi-payer, school-linked statewide fee schedule. So that sounds like a lot, but it's basically to make sure that services that are delivered at a school site can be paid. So there are a number of districts and county offices that are participating in that first cohort. And unfortunately, we're hearing some troubling accounts about some major issues with the fee schedule that actually make it more difficult for schools to bill for these school-based services. So, of course, it's important to note that cohort 1 will be the ones that help work out these issues. We've been hearing that the troubling piece is that the participating LEAs are speaking out on these implementation issues and not seeing their concerns addressed. So ACSA has been part of a coalition of other statewide associations and organizations. We've been regularly meeting with the state agencies on some of these issues, but we've recently had to escalate some of these concerns to legislative staff and have been actively meeting with legislative analyst office, for example, as well as Assembly and Senate budget staff to kind of, tease out some of these issues and really get them addressed.
Let me ask both of you here at the end. So after August 31st, walk us through what comes next for the ACSA advocacy team, especially because we're moving towards Election Day in November. Dorothy, I'll have you start.
Well, so for the legislative side of the House, after the 31st, the governor has 30 days to sign or veto all of his bills. Our team will be working closely to make sure that our message is conveyed. On the election side, glad you mentioned it, Proposition 2, our school facility bond, to bring $10 billion in critical funding for modernization and construction. That will be going to voters, and you're going to be hearing your ACSA team talking about it a lot because it's really important. And then we're going to head into conference season and hopefully get to see a lot of our members out in the field and through all the professional development opportunities. And then, of course, preparing for next year with all of our other sponsored bills and new bill proposals.
And Saret, your thoughts on that?
Oh, yeah, it's a treasure to have our ACSA councils beginning to meet. That really is an excellent time to vet potential legislative ideas, other potential policy changes that might need an ed code fix or change in regulations. There's also a lot of work that goes into various work groups, task forces, and subcommittees at the state agency level. So just for an example, CTC has a work group devoted to the revamp of the child development permit. That's a pathway for early education. CTC is also working on a work group for, it's formed by Senate Bill 1263, a Newman bill. It actually hasn't even been signed, but the CTC is committed to seeking these recommendations to changes in the current teacher performance assessment. So it's really important that we maintain a line of communication with our representatives, our ACSA members who are part of these work groups, just to help reinforce their recommendations, but also chime in if our rep identifies anything problematic. And then I would just say, finally, our members know this all too well. We need to iron out any kinks when bills are signed and just make sure we have that smoothest path to implementation. And just to give you a real-time example, we have recently signed legislation adding the personal finance course as a state grad requirement. Okay, so some LEAs are currently trying to navigate that new requirement and the approval process and considering piloting the courses sooner than later. But there needs to be some work on the CTC side to establish a supplementary authorization so that they can teach the course and that current teachers are able to work on this. So those are some of the other pieces happening.
Edgar will tell you night and day that the thing that I always talk about, optics. Optics is always something I talk about. Dorothy, you held up a piece of paper that had like 8,000 logos, which just completely drives me nuts. But seriously, it's 2.5 pages of logos.
That is ACSA. That is ACSA in action. That is our membership, our partners, and other education management leaders coming together to stop a bill that would really be bad for students. So yeah, it's pretty great.
Okay. All right.
The bad aesthetics are part of the point. It's 2 pages of people. How bad this bill is that we're filling up 2.5 pages.
That's fine. That's fine. All right. I'll let that one go. Saret Kaminsky, Dorothy Johnson, our 2 ACSA legislative advocates. Thank you guys so much for being on here. We look forward to having you guys next time.
Thanks so much.
Thank you.
A lot to tell you about coming up here from ACSA. We'll start with our ACSA podcast network. We have 3 podcasts here at ACSA now, all available for you. The very first one we'll talk about, the ACSA Leadership Classroom podcast that is hosted by Michael Kelly and myself. We take a look at leadership with guests from outside of the world of public education. Our first guest was tech entrepreneur Vivek Ranadive. This time, the podcast, which debuts next week, our second episode, has Dr. Luke Wood, president, California State University, Sacramento. He's a former student there, and now he's the president there. So stay tuned for that. That one drops next week. Behind the Bills, you heard Surrett talk about Behind the Bills. We just had our 4th episode of Behind the Bills come out yesterday. That's hosted by Ivan Carrillo. His guest was Barrett Snyder from Capital Advisors. Is it Capital Advisors? Yes, Capital Advisors. There's so many out there. So there you go. QR codes for you to scan both of those. And then, of course, we have the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break. How could you miss the video portion of the show? That's okay. You've got the audio portion. A lot of QR codes. You can go ahead and screen those. And also, when you subscribe to YouTube, you can subscribe to us on Instagram. When you go on to YouTube and subscribe to us, you'll get instant alerts, Edgar, when we're about to come on the air with breaking news. And then, of course, to promo our regularly scheduled Wednesday edition of the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break. There you go. There's our Instagram feed right there. We invite you to subscribe to that as well. And 2 last things. One, if you have great stories happening in your communities, go ahead and send those to our great EdCal editor, Michelle Carl. Your news releases, your photos, your bullet points, your talking points, send those mcarl@axa.org. Want to say hello to a first-time viewer, Edgar. See, I do keep track of those things. John Smith, Superintendent, Tri-Cities ROP in Whittier. John, welcome to our ACSA Legislative Lunch Break family. And you weren't here, Edgar, for this. I mean, obviously you were here for the photo, but you didn't get to hear the aftermath of it. So the photo, if we want to pop that up, this is of you and I after winning the cornhole tournament at the ACSA picnic. Now, Megan Bear, who has been on the show a couple of times, as you know, said, "Oh, great, Naj, what are we going to? We're going to see that photo on here like 7 times on the lunch break." All right, we're going to hit that number. Megan, this is time number 2 that photo is on there. Get ready, because this is week 3 of 9 consecutive weeks of the ACSA Legislative Lunch Break. Get ready, Megan. We're
proud of our cornhole dominance there amongst our other ACSA colleagues.
Yeah,
I know Dr. Daryl Kemp is there I saw him in the comments. He will probably point out and be hurt that we haven't showed his picture. He did. He was part of the winning team at the ACSA border. It's cornhole and ACSA leadership is it's a big deal. We take this very serious. So we have an annual staff tournament. We also have a tournament amongst our board members, and Dara, I guess, got lucky and won that tournament. But we'll have to do a face-off there, staff versus the board members, and see who prevails.
I think you're exactly right. Folks, thanks so much for being with us here on the live and interactive ACSA Legislative Lunch Break. Remember, we are live and interactive Wednesdays here on ACSA Facebook and ACSA YouTube. Have a great rest of the day and rest of the week. We'll see you right here next Wednesday on ACSA Facebook and ACSA YouTube.